Thank you, everybody. Good morning, and thank you, Professor Matsuo. What an outstanding conference this has been. We really want to acknowledge Professor Matsuo for his outstanding work for the blockchain community, his expertise, and especially in creating such dynamic and informative conferences. I look forward to the various BGIN conferences in 2023. I'm Gary Weinstein, Head of Global Regulatory Relations for Electric Coin Company, ECC, creators and supporters of Zcash, which facilitates a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency, ZEC. We have heard a lot about the public and transparent nature of the blockchain. I would like to spend a little bit of time on privacy and confidential transactions. There seems to be a reflexive understanding, if you will, by some, especially by some individuals in government or forensics companies, that privacy or confidential transactions on the blockchain are the purview of money launderers, terrorists, and traffickers. If you permit, I would like to share with you some thoughts developed by my colleague, Chris Tomio at Electric Coin Company, to frame the narrative a bit differently. He writes, "Privacy is for good guys. It's for moms and bike messengers and foodies. Privacy is for business meetings and voting booths. It's why we have shower curtains. It's why we have that little padlock icon in our browser bar. Privacy protects you from discrimination and identity theft, and it keeps your food delivery history under wraps. It can also shield you from those creepy, somebody has definitely been listening to my thoughts ads on social media apps. Privacy isn't about shutting out everyone and everything. Instead, privacy gives you the power to choose what and with whom you'll share. It provides safety, control, and the right to grant access. Privacy gives you the ability to express yourself, to be creative, and to spend your time and your money in whatever manner you like without the scrutiny of others. It protects our intimate moments, our most embarrassing ambitions, our radical ideas, and the ability to be our true selves. Privacy is freedom, consent, dignity, and security. Privacy is normal." I would like to go into a little detail about my background because it is perhaps relevant to how I think about creating public-private partnerships with governments globally. While I've been practicing law for 28 years, I started my career as a regulator, an assistant attorney general in New York. I was an antitrust prosecutor, prosecuting international price-fixing conspiracies. And I had a golden opportunity to cut my teeth in the trial courts in the Southern District of New York and Eastern District of New York, including the Second Circuit Appellate Court. I'm admitted to the Supreme Court of the United States, and later in my career, I was lead counsel in a case that I brought in the Supreme Court of the United States. After 7 years as a regulator protecting consumers, I had an opportunity to join a national financial services company where we developed financial products for the unbanked. For my entire career, I've been focused on financial inclusion. I've managed the regulatory and litigation for my past company. I was chief privacy officer, and I was elevated to acting general counsel. One of the most exciting opportunities I had was to concurrently serve as treasurer and secretary of a 501c6 industry organization that developed products for the unbanked. We work collaboratively with our valued regulatory partners to build these products in responsible ways to foster financial inclusion. And we stood up one of the first ISACs, Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, to combat stolen identity refund fraud, working collaboratively with the IRS commissioner and with criminal law enforcement at various federal agencies. Together, we figured out ways to combat money laundering and the illicit activity of nation-state actors looking to launder money through stolen identities and fraudulent tax returns. At one of our offsites in the summer of 2018, we invited a 2-star general who was responsible for NORAD to guide us about blockchain. This was something that was career fascinating to me, how blockchain and distributed ledger technology could change the world. My regulatory background informs my ongoing respect and deep appreciation for the challenges that face governments worldwide. But I would like to come back to the important recognition that privacy is normal. When you think about it, transparency can be a threat to governments and their citizens. And transparency is not how modern societies conduct financial transactions. When we send digital assets, we might need to start to think a lot harder about whether everybody gets to see that transaction. That is presently what generally occurs on the blockchain. My mayor, my employer, my friends, my family, and every stranger on the planet, including North Korean hackers, should not be able to, with the push of a few buttons, view and study my balances and my transactions and disrupt my ability to interact privately in Web3. When businesses purchase resources for their company on the blockchain, they should not have to reveal to competitors in the space what they are doing. That gets back to fundamental antitrust principles in terms of competition benefiting consumers at the end of the day. So what does Electric Coin Company do, and how do we contribute to advancing the notion that privacy is normal? Well, we created and support Zcash in an open source way, a protocol that solves this public ledger problem. Zcash facilitates a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency, ZEC, for confidential value transfer using zero-knowledge proof cryptography. The protocol facilitates options for transactions to be either shielded, confidential, or non-confidential on the Zcash blockchain. ECC's mission is to empower people with economic freedom. In support of that mission, we contribute to and support a fair open currency to protect the freedom, dignity, consent, and security of people all over the world. ECC is widely known to be one of the strongest cryptography teams in the world. In 2016, we were the first to successfully deploy zero-knowledge proofs in a real-world application, Zcash. And in 2022, recently, we released Halo, a new trustless recursive zero-knowledge proof that eliminates extremely complex implementation processes and allows scalability never before seen in the tech world. There are already dozens of teams on various independent projects working to implement Halo. We are also, just as importantly, focused on financial literacy with our program called Crypto in Context. This program brings together crypto industry leaders and people in underserved communities for dialogue and discovery, networking, and collaborative workshops focused on cryptocurrencies and financial literacy. Taking root in 2019, ECC has held successful pilots in the South Bronx and Harlem in New York. Companies such as Gemini, Coinbase, Flexa, Masari, and others have partnered with us in these programs, which provide the framework for hands-on experience and personal connection. Decisions about the future of Zcash are in the hands of the decentralized Zcash community, not ECC. We make scientific discoveries, create cutting-edge technology, and write software that implements it. In 2023, ECC will release and support a commercially available Zcash mobile wallet in the Android and iOS app stores. Our hypothesis is that Zcash adoption will grow if the user experience is excellent, easy, and fast, and users are given interesting features and capabilities that support a growing number of use cases. As the inventor and as a continual supporter of Zcash, ECC is best equipped to deliver a wallet that provides an industry-leading user experience, as well as features that will benefit crypto more broadly. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the ongoing work of my colleague at ECC, Paul Brigner, head of US Public Policy and Strategic Advocacy. After Paul joined ECC in February this year, he took steps to increase ECC's engagement with the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network by sponsoring BGIN's 5th and 6th meetings and has been a regular participant in 2 working groups at BGIN. Paul is attending virtually today, and together with Josh Swihart, SVP Growth, Product Strategy, and Regulatory Affairs at ECC, we are proud to continue our sponsorship of this 7th meeting of BGIN. At ECC, we are focused on the importance of the consent of the individual to choose their level of confidentiality. In other words, how much data they want to leak. I might want to send a digital asset to an individual where I want it to be non-confidential. Maybe I'm sending this asset to an organization where it is valuable, needed, or required that the digital asset be transparent. But maybe I am in a jurisdiction where my purchase of medication is legal at the time I do so, but then it becomes illegal sometime in the future because of a despotic leader or simply a change in state law. And there is a statute of limitations opportunity to prosecute me for that past transaction. All of the data that we are leaking on these publicly distributed ledgers might be fine now, but there may come a time when all of this future data leakage jeopardy that we are putting ourselves in needs to be very carefully considered. Even governments, and I had this issue working in government for many years, have a hard time keeping servers and databases secure, and they are hacked all the time. So when we think about developing CBDCs, for example, are we really with that level of transparency and or centralized custody, putting our national security interests at risk and those of our citizens? I think it's apparent to this audience in particular, but it's worth emphasizing that the transparency of the blockchain compromises individual privacy. Given the transparency of records and the linkage of those transactions, it's not too difficult to construct someone's complete financial history. That should be frightening. And it's unfortunately easy to make a mistake and unintentionally link a publicly identifiable address to a confidential address. Once that occurs, then a third party can use those transactions or links between a user's wallet to identify that user and gain access to a tremendous amount of personal transactions and financial information related to that user. It might be instructive to think about the value of end-to-end encryption, since we fought and won that crypto war already. Encryption is a way of securing digital communications using mathematical algorithms that protect the content of a communication while in transmission or storage. Encryption can ensure privacy and security online and is essential for safeguarding rights. This includes the rights to freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of association and peaceful assembly, security, health, and non-discrimination. With encryption, sharing information freely can be accomplished without fear that information may become known to others. Many of us are privileged to live in societies without state censorship, but many are not. In jurisdictions with censorship, encryption enables the free expression of ideas and opinions. It's critical for journalists and human rights defenders, for women with threats of surveillance, harassment, and violence online, in armed conflicts to secure communication among civilians. My emphasis on this importance is not just me tilting at windmills, but has been recognized worldwide. The United Nations General Assembly and the Human Rights Council have also, quote, highlighted the importance of encryption in safeguarding human rights in several resolutions, calling upon states to refrain from interfering with encryption technologies and encouraging business enterprises to work towards enabling solutions to secure and protect the confidentiality of digital communications and transactions, including measures for encryption, pseudonymization, and anonymity. Even in the United States, President Biden, in his March 9th, 2022 executive order on the development of digital assets, has called to, quote, ensure that safeguards are in place and promote the responsible development of digital assets to protect consumers, investors, and businesses, maintain privacy, and shield against arbitrary or unlawful surveillance, which can contribute to human rights abuses. But unfortunately, more common is the standard government narrative that encryption needs to be restricted for the protection of national security and combating crime. And governments have enacted restrictions to include bans on encrypted communications and criminalization for offering or using encryption tools. Or they have required a backdoor, or that private keys needed to decrypt data be handed over to the government or a designated third party. But I would challenge the thinking here and say that governments seeking to limit encryption have often failed to show that the restrictions they would impose are necessary to meet a particular legitimate interest, given the availability of other tools and approaches that provide the information needed for specific law enforcement or other legitimate purposes. Such alternative measures include improved, better resourced traditional policing, undercover operations, metadata analysis, and strengthened international police cooperation. But the narrative that I would like to try to convince governments of is that any such restrictions will have a significant negative effect on their citizens. Key escrow systems are subject to cyber attacks, and mandated backdoors in encryption tools jeopardize the privacy and security of all users and expose them to unlawful interference, not only by states, but also by non-state actors, including criminal networks. Governments also rely on end-to-end encryption. When the COVID-19 pandemic forced many people into remote work, the United States published guidance for US government employees and military service members to use end-to-end encryption. Numerous UN resolutions adopted by consensus of all UN member states have highlighted the vital importance of encryption in safeguarding human rights. ECC believes responsible regulation can be good for the industry and that well-informed policymakers produce better guidance. We also believe our technology benefits from the insight we gain in conversations with officials close to the fight against money laundering and other financial crimes. And because our protocol at Zcash and what we do is open source, people are free to take our technology, subject to the applicable licenses, and do grand things with it. We are a wholly owned sub of a public charity, and it is our mission to contribute to the social good. And if our zero-knowledge proof cryptography allows for these use cases to be realized, then we will have accomplished our mission. In wrapping up, let's not let the edge cases of illicit activity be used as the lens to judge, punish, and restrict a new technology. And perhaps we can recognize that the more we build access to decentralized, permissionless systems for individuals worldwide, the more it will actually dramatically reduce the honeypots we are now all unwittingly racing around to create. And in reframing the narrative a bit, perhaps the optionality for confidential transactions on the blockchain with encryption at inception using zero-knowledge proof technology will push illicit activity to the edge, preserve our human rights, and reestablish that privacy is normal. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very, very much for giving me this opportunity to join this very great blog. I've learned quite a lot in the past 2 days, and I hope I'm going to learn more today as well. My name is Yuko Kawai. I'm heading the company called Japan Digital Design, which is a part of the Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, one of the largest banking groups in Japan. Today, I would like to talk about the possible use cases for the incumbent financial institutions for the tokens and blockchain technologies. First, about my company, we are the Japan Design. We are like quite a new company, and we provide 3 major services to the banks and also the other companies within the Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group. The one is the data analytics, and the other is the digital design, digital product designing, and technology, the IT, the information technologies to support all those functions, kind of things. So we decided to have these 3 functions because we need all of them to support the innovations and the modernization of the financial services in Japan. So and as a part of that, those activities, I mean, we are offering some consultancy and also the technological support services for utilizing the blockchain technologies for the financial services. So the hypothesis for the potential commercial usage of the use of the blockchain technologies and tokens for the incumbent banks. Hypothesis behind that one, the decentralized financial information network will grow, but we will stay kind of like decentralized mix for maybe quite a while. And even though we may stay like mostly in the centralized network for a while, the several components of such may be replaced by tokens, the blockchain-based technologies. So what roles traditional commercial banks can assume in this partially decentralized network or the tokenized networks? The first apparent possibility is to offer the stable coins, backed by the bank deposits. This is the kind of the landscape. This slide is trying to show the landscape of the payment methods in Japan. We start with the legal tender, the central bank at the core, the reserve deposit, and also the cash. And surrounding the reserve deposit, we have the bank deposit, commercial bank deposit, commercial bank deposit, and the commercial bank deposit is kind of like these 3 times of the legal tender, and so the backed by those bank deposits, or maybe not backed by those bank deposits, we have the other types of the e-monies, the ones you may have, the ones we may have in the mobile applications, or like ones maybe printed on the paper, like the local tokens, the customer loyalty points, or the electric money, which may be in the wallets, wallet applications of the mobile phones. And we have the very independent group of the money transferring tools, the crypto assets. So we are already offering the electronized the remittance format, which is not based on the blockchain, and and we are already proving that those facilities, those tools work very well. Like easy payments are now can be pursued through the mobile applications or the internet, but the bank deposit transfer, and user protection is in place. It is fully in place as the bank credit. Or even for the non-bank the services, we have the Payment Services Act to support to provide some security. Provide some security for the users, and the functions are already very well proved. The main function is remittance, but the other function is like marketing, the providing like marketing incentives by providing the extra loyalty points and something like that. But those are already proved. But so why do we need to go into the stable coins on top of which is on top of what we already have, what is already working? So we are still in the centralized world, but there may be some purposes to issue blockchain tokens. The functions can be such that the more efficient remittance, or the providing the investment and financing tools, or the transferable format of the non-monetary value, like what we talk about the NFT. So we may have something new we may have something new if we provide the bank deposit-based stable coins on top of what we already have as a electronic transferable money. Let me just discuss about the legal or the regulatory the environment for those functions. For the efficient remittance, the regulations are already in place, that the Payment Services Act or the Banking Act, they support the legal aspect. But for the investment and financing, the Japanese laws are not fully covering that aspect of the stable coins or the tokens. And also, like for the transferable format of the non-monetary value, like NFT, the laws are not in place. I mean, the laws are not well defined. What kind of rights those tokens are representing, and so forth. And also, there may be some other reasons aside from like the multiple functions the stable coins can offer, like the very apparent one, of course, is the programmability, and the other is the shared distributed ledger character. But again, like a legal nature is not quite there. Is not clarified already, and also the for the users, the literacy of the users is still a problem. But we are pursuing as an MHE, like they think about the several usage for the wholesale applications like trade finance, international money transfer, securities and insurance contracts, digital asset information recording, and other things. But when there are some like the practical issues around against those possible applications like trade finance. Well, but it is still supposed to be the number of applications for using the blockchain technologies, but is it justifiable enough in terms of the cost of building the structure over the existing trade finance network? International money transfer, many people are trying in Japan as well, but it's not really replacing the traditional system yet. Securities insurance contracts, many POCs are ongoing, including the ones which are taken by the MFG. And like we are testing the field, but still it's not really scalable yet. Digital assets, again, like scalability is it's a problem, and legal clarity is a problem. Information recording, exchange verification, it's not like so much there are not so much going on in Japan, but I mean we hear some international use cases like the ones offered by the JP Morgan and so forth. So like overall, the questions we have are what are the benefits over the existing system? Who pay the building cost for whose benefit? And also the other question, like should we wait for the legal clarity, regulatory clarity, and or should we wait for the CBDC to be issued so that we have better idea that what the future form of the monetary system would be? The other possibility we are pursuing at this moment is the trend in the consideration of the transitionary C word to a kind of like a mixture of the D word and the decentralized and centralized world. Many metaverses are popping up in Japan, not only in Japan but globally, I guess, but in Japan as well. And we have like independent metaverses, universes, which are like independently running their unique tokens and IDs. So we are thinking about, well, first, of course, the settlement within the universe, and also the thinking about the transfer or the mutual entry between the different metaverses, and also the cross-token exchange and exchange with the legal tender. So those like token exchanges, or maybe the common tokens, can be stable coins to connect like the different universes. And we may think about the custody for the digital assets, which again can be commonized amongst different universes. We may think about the common ID or the anti-money laundering the know your customer systems, or the convertible avatars. I mean, which are not quite the monetary thing, but that it's again like transferability and mutual entry nature that we may be able to offer. So like if we ever go into like a Web3 world, those technologies will be used. So like why don't we like set our hands at this moment in the transitionary centralized world? Many issues are still not clear, but we cannot, of course, shy away from the blockchain tokens. There must be something, and technologies will emerge on the front edge. So we really need to experience, and we really need to be a part of them. And But I mean, as said, there are many things which are not clear yet legally, regulatory, and also how to monetize things and so forth. But we really want to try technologies and concepts for the so we're starting with the international activities and experimental activities. So the MUFG will launch an outlet in the soon opening metaverse Groundwire, which is the Japan like the conglomerate, the metaverse. It's coming like next year, and we are like trying to do like as many experimental things as possible. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matsuo-san. Yeah, I would very much appreciate Professor Matsuo's effort to develop the blockchain world, and I'm very happy to be able to appear even on the web to this honorable event. Thank you very much. And today we'd like to explain a little bit about our effort to introduce the DCJPY, which is a digital currency platform for the digital currency with a stable value dominated by the Japanese yen. And first of all, yeah, it is very clear that blockchain and DLT are promising technologies. For example, as Yuko mentioned, there's a lots of new world like Web3 or some sort of a new currency or new digital asset like a security token or NFTs. And we need a blockchain technology and DLT technology to facilitate the trading and transaction of these new digitized asset. And at the same time, we need a stable value. We need a currency with a stable value because the currency or payment instrument is a nominal anchor. So we need a currency or payment instrument with a stable value. How to strike the right balance between the requirement for the new technology and the requirement for stable value? I think there's a couple of ways. That's why there's lots of stable coins appearing in the new world. But the easiest way to introduce the payment instrument with a stable value is to use the bank deposit incumbent banks, because bank deposit have already been protected by the banking regulation and deposit insurance. So the easiest way is to enhance the capability and function of the bank deposit. And this is a basic idea of the Digital Currency Forum. And now, Digital Currency Forum aims at establishing a digital currency platform entitled as DCJPY, which is a JPY, Japanese yen denominated digital currency. And our Digital Currency Forum is expanding, and we have now around 100 members, including the Japanese 3 mega banks and other banks, as well as some firms which is deeply involved in the digital currency businesses and the digitized world. And our membership is very, a variety of memberships, such as including the commercial companies or retailers or transportation companies or some sort of data company, IT companies. And there's a couple of subcommittees inside the Digital Currency Forum, which is now involved in the proof of concept or some sort of experiment on the digital currency platforms. And then I'd like to explain a little bit about our digital currency platform, DCJPY. As I mentioned, that DCJPY is a platform for the JPY denominated stable value digital currency. And we expect that those DCJPY would initially be issued by commercial banks. Of course, there's a couple of ways is to stabilize the value of the payment instruments, such as stablecoin, or use reserves or backed up asset, 100% backed up asset, or other tools like a stablecoin. But the easiest way is to use the bank deposit already issued by the commercial banks, because commercial banks' deposit are already protected by the existing regulations. So DCJPY could be regarded as advanced bank deposit, which can incorporate new technologies, including the blockchain or DLT or smart contract. And DCJPY consists of two-tiered structure. on the common layer, the lower layer, there's a fundamental part of the DCJPY, and it make a transaction among the banks and the basic transactions. And on the upper part, we can incorporate the smart contract or other sophisticated technology in order to facilitate enhanced transaction or automatic transaction among the companies or among the individual B2C or B2B. And this picture illustrates the structure of the two-tiered structure of DCJPY. There's a on the upper part, there's a business process area. And this business process area can incorporate the smart contract and issue the payment instruction automatically. And by using the blockchain technology, we can synchronize the payment instruction issued from the upper layer to the lower layers movement. And we can facilitate the automated transaction as well as the transaction of the new digital asset like NFT or securities token. This is the basic framework of our DCJPY framework. And I believe that there's many benefits to DCJPY. First of all, as I mentioned, the DCJPY's value is stable. It is based on the Japanese yen, and it's safe as the existing bank deposit. And of course, by using the smart contract, DCJPY platform reduce cost and enhance efficiency of the economic transactions. And the third, it can maintain the financial intermediation. For example, if CBDC is issued by the central bank may take the deposit from private bank sector to the central banks, and it would reduce the amount of private-led financial intermediation. But since the DCJPY is regarded as a bank deposit, it may not cause any effect or any impact on the volume of financial intermediation led by the private banks. And in a similar vein, we can avoid the digital bank run, which might occur from the private sector to the central bank if central bank digital currency is issued. And of course, by using the two-tiered platform, we can enhance the interoperability. And by using the smart contract, we can satisfy various business needs. And then, since the DCJPY could be regarded as an enhanced bank deposit, we can utilize the existing bank regulation and deposit insurance in order to safeguard the value of the payment instrument. And then we could foster the private-led innovation. And in addition, the banking sector could use the relevant information and data attached to the payment transaction. And we are doing a variety of POC or experiment. This is one of the examples made by our subcommittees. This is the POC made by the retail and distribution subcommittee. And yes, the concept is simple. There's a variety of movement of goods and services among the retailers and wholesale companies. And by using smart contract, we would be able to issue the payment instrument automatically triggered by the movement of goods and services. And by synchronizing those payment instructions with the movement of the lower layer, we could facilitate an automated transaction and synchronize the movement of the goods and services and payment instruments. That's the basic concept. And we could apply this kind of technology and this kind of framework also to a variety of economic transactions. For example, the transaction of the NFT or security token, or make a sort of trade finance by using the similar kind of technologies. So there's a variety of potentials and possibilities in DCJPY framework. And then at last, I'd like to talk a little bit about the relationship between the DCJPY and CBDC, because now many central banks are studying the possibility of the CBDC, although most of the central banks have not yet decided whether the CBDC should be issued or not. And in Japan, Bank of Japan is studying the CBDC. When I was Director General of the Payment System Department of the Bank of Japan, I started the joint studies about the CBDC with the European Central Bank. And there are many central banks which are now studying the possibility of the CBDC. Japan is the same. But actually, even though the CBDC is issued in the future, DCJPY can coexist with the CBDC, central bank digital currency, because of its two-tiered structure. Because our DCJPY consists of upper layer and lower layer. Simply attaching the lower layer or simply linking the lower layer with the central bank digital currency, we could facilitate the transaction by incorporating the smart contract into the CBDC framework and then facilitate the transaction by using the central bank liabilities. So I believe that DCJPY can coexist with the CBDC. This is a very important point. And actually, at this juncture, for Japanese economy, the DX of the economy is the most important tasks or most important challenges for the Japanese economy, not only for the government, but also for the private sector. So it is not a good idea to stop thinking about the DX of the payment transaction or stop thinking about utilization of the blockchain, mainly because the uncertainty of the CBDC. Because now the European Central Bank argued that it will need more 2 years to decide whether the CBDC should be issued or not. And they will take another 3 years to prepare for the CBDC. So at the earliest, even though the ECB decided to issue the CBDC, it will take another 4 or 5 years to issue CBDC. And in Japan, maybe the situation is the same, but it may not be a good idea to wait for the decision made by the central bank. And I believe that the private sector have to do what we can do immediately in order to promote the digitalization of the economy. And this is a basic idea of the DCJPY. And our digital currency forum will continue making effort to enhance the efficiency of the Japanese payment infrastructure and contribute to the DX of the Japan's economy. Thank you very much.
I would like to switch to the panel discussion with Gary, Yuko-san, and Hiromi-san. Okay. Could you? Okay, I think we have 30 or 40 minutes for the panel discussion. I'm sorry that I didn't provide some key question in advance, but so I found that so three of you are currently working with industry, some company or industry, but so three of you are all of you are coming from the regulators or central bank. That is very interesting thing. So all you understand so the culture of central bank or culture of regulators and the culture of that startups or industry. And I would like to ask my first question. So what is the key difference in culture? So between that established regulators, established central banks, and so that cutting edge industry. It's okay, Gary.
Sure. Thank you so much, Professor Matsuo, and thank you to my fellow panelists for the inspiring. And I think the point that you raised is quite intriguing. And what it speaks to is that the constituent members of the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network are high integrity companies. Sometimes we like to say in the vernacular, adults in the room. We come from regulatory backgrounds. Some of us have legal backgrounds. Those that work for national banks, as individuals with regulatory backgrounds as well have reputations to protect. Some have even licenses to protect. So it's critical that when we discuss complex issues that blockchain and distributed ledger technology presents to governments, and I tried to allude to a little bit of that in my panel presentation, it's important that governments recognize that we are here to work with them in responsible ways. Thank you, Professor. We are here to work with governments in responsible ways. We may not be able to agree on everything. As I alluded to in my panel presentation, backdoors are anathema to sensible and reasonable blockchain interactions. And really, backdoors only make data available to hackers, including pariah nation states. So when we work with governments and individuals such as my panelists who have such impressive backgrounds, I think we can sit at a table together with government officials. And as a former government official, the responsibility is tremendous. There are constituents to protect. There's politics involved. There are heads of state to satisfy. There are agency heads to coordinate with. And very often in government, not all agencies agree. And some countries have federal and state systems. And even if the federal system agency heads can agree with each other, which almost never happens, certainly state executive heads, governors, if you will not always agree amongst each other or with the federal government. So what this creates is a need for responsible, high integrity companies in this space. And unfortunately, we are dealing with the turmoil of organizations that are not high integrity. And we need to present to government that we are able to work through these various complex issues and try to arrive at a result that protects the privacy of our citizens, allows for innovation, and frankly, doesn't chase blockchain to the far corners of the earth where there is no regulation and where bad actors and illicit actors will find safe haven. We need to create the right regulatory structure, and I hope to be a part of that discussion.
Okay, and so you know that so high integrity is currently highly needed. So after the FTX thing, and so from your point of view, that if there's some cryptocurrency exchange or blockchain companies would like to have some high integrity, what is the key points, key activities that those companies should do?
Thank you, Professor. First, I would like to respond to your mention of FTX, and I would like to call out the Blockchain Association, which recently published and is using on Capitol Hill in the United States and elsewhere, a description of why the FTX international collapse is not a crypto problem. Rather, it is garden variety fraud and alleged criminal activity. And in fact, the one arm of FTX, which is to date operating smoothly, is Ledger X. And we heard a little bit about that in some of the panel discussions yesterday. Ledger X is under the regulation of the CFTC. And it's a good example of how proper and appropriate regulation can actually create the right environment for innovation and for consumer protection and financial stability. All of this needs to work hand in hand. So to get to your question, Professor, about what are the components of a high integrity company? And I do acknowledge that that is a difficult concept. But I think probably the common denominator there would be individuals who have career histories of thinking hard about how do we protect consumers? How do we achieve financial stability? And how do we work to foster innovation in disruptive technologies where the laws are in conflict or not written yet, or where regulators are still trying to figure out what is the best way forward. And working with individuals who have spent time in their career thinking about those issues are probably the ones, if I were a government official, that I would want to have at the table to work with me to try to tackle these issues. I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. And one good news, so the other two panelists is coming from Japan. And one good news regarding the FTX is that, for the FTX Japan, JP, so that all assets are segregated. So under that supervision of the JFSA, that is a good news. And Japan has a very strict regulation for the crypto asset. And that strict regulation helps that customer in Japan. At the same time that, so their blockchain community people in the, all over the world really notice that kind of regulation could one of the good things to have, but of course, there's no perfect regulation in the world, but Japan is one of the good case that one of the good example of the regulation. I think, but and in general, so most of the Japanese established company has a high integrity, I believe, and so this is my question to Yuko-san and Hiromi-san, that the Japanese culture so prioritize that so high integrity in general, but so what is so the lesson learned from that past Japanese culture, or so JFSA regulations, or Japanese corporate culture, so which could be helpful for the global companies of the blockchain?
Wow. Okay. Let me take it first. Well, yes, I mean, as the Professor Matsuo said, that I have a central bank background. I was working for Hiromi when I was there, and I'm so glad to be on this panel with him. The high integrity of Japanese culture, well, I think it's there, and it worked very well in light with, in light with the trouble with the FTX. And I'm so glad that Japanese FSA was ahead of like many countries in setting up the good regulations for the crypto asset exchanges. But on the other hand, when the regulation was put in place, it was criticized very heavily that it may stifle, it may like stop the innovations because the regulations was quite strict, and the crypto exchanges registered must be subject to the inspections and monitoring by the Japanese FSA, which costed a lot to the crypto exchanges. So it's always a balance, as everybody knows that it's always a balance between the innovation, the regulations, and the cost of being regulated. But when it's still like it's good to be diligent in the new innovation area especially when the retail users are being involved. But we can just learn from them, that we can just learn from the Japanese example in the FTX case, that we can be, we need to be diligent in these like the retail space. On the other hand, as I mentioned in my presentation, like many wholesale applications where professionals are there, professionals who can be responsible for themselves are there. The innovations in that frontier, I think Japanese integrity may be hindering some of the innovations. It may be like stifling some of the innovations and innovations. So it's always a balance, I would say.
Thank you very much. The same question for Hiromi-san.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting and good question. And I think that the central bank is inherently very cautious, and we are worrying about many things every day. And in addition to that, in Japan, there's a long diet session. And the diet session continue from January to June. And if something happened in the financial market, even though it's on the crypto asset exchange, not only the bank, but also in the crypto asset exchanges, if something happens, bureaucrats are called to the parliament and asked to explain what is happening and is there any failure of the regulation or not. So, and the Japanese regulators and supervisors have to think about the possibility that they have been called to, they should be called to the parliament to explain anything happening in the financial market. That's the basic background in the Japanese supervisory and regulatory environment. And this is something produce good things. For example, in terms of the segregation of the asset, as Professor Matsuo mentioned, I think this is a good case that Japan took a very cautious stance towards crypto asset exchanges. And that's why we protect the customer's asset in terms of the crypto asset. That is one of the good things. But in some cases, such kind of a tendency may, how to say, they slow down the development of the new technology sometimes. For example, we have a tendency to look for other countries and what happened in the other country, and then take our own actions. That is a, how to say, particular tendency in the Japanese industry. And in terms of the difference between the central banks or regulators and the private sectors, in terms of the payment system or monetary system, there's a couple of similarity between the central banks or regulators and private sectors. For example, in the Bank of Japan, if we think about the CBDC or something, we of course have to spend how to say, some portion of the money to say promote or make investment in the CBDC studies. And what we have to think about is how to explain our activity to the parliament always. And we have to think about the possibility of the hacking to the CBDC or some privacy issues in terms of CBDC. And in the private sector, of course, the characteristic of the anxiety is a bit different, but we have to think about the similar issues. For example, in the digital currency forum, there's a bunch of Japanese big banks in the digital currency forum, and they have to think about also the privacy issues and of course the risk of hacking to the our own platform, DCJPI. There's a lot of similarity if we think about the monetary infrastructure, because it's the basis of the nation's infrastructure, and it is the basis for the many economic transactions. So even though it is regardless of it's a central bank or commercial banks, banking industry have to think about the security issues or privacy issues very, very cautiously when we think about establishing the very basic infrastructure for the Japan's economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And okay, Yuko-san,
Yes.
do you have something to say?
Yes, thank you. I joined block number 6 physically this July, and there were lots of things I learned from block 6 as well. But the impressive statement I got out of block 6 was the difference between the global and international. So when I think about the difference of being in the public sector or being in the private sector, in the private sector, people can be global, while the public sector people, by its nature, will be the international. Because the public sector people always needs to think in terms of the nation, which the public sector people are linked to. So in the blockchain world, high integrity, can come from the high integrity of each individual, the actor, but also the global notion is quite important, which may only come from the private sector, from the very apparent reason. So I think it may be worthwhile to discuss how the global versus the international, the concept of how the difference of the concept can affect the regulatory environment or the non-regulatory environment, which may only come from the private sector integrity for the blockchain.
Okay, thank you very much. And so as Yuko-san told at the previously about that cost for the as aligned to the regulation. You know that as in my understanding that Japanese regulation is very strict, and Japan is a very conservative country relative to the United States. And yeah, yesterday Ali told about that you know that Anglo-Saxon law or European law, something like civil law and common law. You know, Japan is a country of the civil law, I think. That so it is also one restriction for Japan to limit that possibility of innovation. But this help that the segregation of that asset against that FTX case. But I would like to pick up that word by Gary. Gary told about the interest provided some interesting word, responsible regulation. And it should be that interesting word, but so could you let me know that what do you mean by that responsible regulation?
Yes, that's a complex question, but I think an easy answer is responsible regulation. And especially when you think about it globally, means making sure that technology is not punished for how it might be misused. It's a bit of a backwards way of looking at how society is advancing. Very soon, most of our activities will likely be on the blockchain. And we need to think about regulation that doesn't try to punish that technology, and where regulation is developed in, let's call it a tech neutral way, meaning we're not trying to solve for issues of protocols or blockchains or distributed ledger technologies, but rather we're trying to address fundamental issues of money laundering, illicit activity. And we're balancing that with how society might advance when we can actually transact in ways that are efficient, cost-effective, and where use cases over the next 5 to 10 years can be developed when we look back on this conference, Block 7, and we think about how we had not thought about how society could be improved by this dramatic use case of blockchain. Maybe it's carbon credit trading on the blockchain. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's some version of financial inclusion that allows for elegant remittances across borders in ways that take power from a centralized organization and put it back into the hands of people. We're in a Web3 society. We now own our data and not some big corporation or government. So it's that balance. So to answer your question, responsible regulation means striking that balance, figuring out how do we address the promotion of use cases that will advance our society in very positive ways, while making sure that we still think about our consumers, whether that's consumer protection or financial stability.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it may be easier for the country like the United States or United Kingdom with common law, but it's not easy for the country like Japan with civil law. But what do you think about that, Yuko-san and Hiromi-san? So if we would like to implement responsible regulation in Japan.
I don't know whether Hiromi wants to take it or not. Let me just briefly explain briefly express my my thinking. Yes, it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult in the sense that, well, they both say, take an example of the NFT. It is not like they regulated. It's not put in the Japanese law yet, and the Japanese FSA is working on the clarification of like what would be the what would be the crypto assets which may or may not be NFT, kind of like they are working definitions at this moment for the illustration, but they really need to go deep. They really need to go deep dive into the civil law, as the Professor Matsuda mentioned, and it's not very easy. And because digital assets are not defined in the civil law, which is quite antiquated. It's a quite old law, so it is not very easy. I agree.
Yeah, for example, our civil law originally comes from German law. So our legal system is based on the civil law, not the common law. And that's true. But at the same time, yeah, we incorporate a bunch of US laws in terms of the financial area, for example. And I think that, of course, the basic framework is a bit different. But practically, some sort of difference stemming from the difference coming from the legal structure is now very marginal. Of course, there's a couple of areas when we see some differences. For example, typical case is a trust law, because common law country has a long tradition of the trust law, and there's a lots of practices developed under the trust law histories. And so in this area, there's a couple of differences, of course, in the Japanese financial community. But overall, the difference coming from or stemming from the difference in the legal framework is now marginal. And I think that the major difference coming from the culture of the Japanese practices or business practices. For example, Yuko raised the issue of the NFT. There's a variety of cases between the, one extreme, that is, the liability and asset liability or private contract. And at the other end, collective investment schemes. And between the collective investment scheme and the private contract, there's a variety of cases where the NFT can be used. For example, if we bundle some sort of asset like a copyright of the animators or copyright of the musicians and provide the profit to the investors. Of course, we can think about a variety of NFTs or variety of tokens. But in Japanese culture, if there's no description about such products, such new product, no one wants to do that, worrying about the case in which they are scolded by the regulators. And first, they need to ask the opinion from the regulators, like the FSA. That is the general practice of the Japanese market. And when I make a visit to China, in China, situation is a bit different. China, someone wants to do something by looking for the, some sort of the blank room for the regulation and try to do something new always. And in Japan, if there's no description in the regulation or supervisions, no one wants to do new thing. And first, they need to ask the opinions from the regulators. That's a major difference in Japan. And I feel that such difference mainly comes from the culture of the Japanese business practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so when I would like to going back to that what Yuko-san said about the difference between the global and international. Now, you know that the mathematics is global by nature, and you know that algorithms, protocols defined by the Gcash engineers are global thing, but the problem is so how we translate that global mathematics to that international national regulations. So I think it's a part of the your work, Gary. But so how do you translate that what the mathematics says and what the algorithm says, programming code says to that natural language for the nations or international organizations?
Well, I wasn't aware that mathematics needed translation. But I think you're getting at something slightly different, which is how does one take a protocol which is written with the highest level of cryptography, understood mostly only by cryptographers. Even software engineers have a hard time approaching an understanding of the details of the cryptographic mathematics behind many of these protocols. And understanding sort of a natural function and translation of how that protocol works, I think it really, it's a burden on us as an industry to try to make sure that that's not even needed. So this might be a bit of a radical thought, but when we use Amazon to purchase an item, I don't think any of us really understand what server is communicating with what other server, which is handshaking with a fulfillment destination, which is then communicated in some encrypted way across channels in order to fulfill that order. We simply press a button, provide an address, and that item hopefully comes to us the next day. There's no need to understand the underlying mathematics or translate the underlying mathematics in order to receive that item from Amazon. And hopefully, and this is, as I mentioned, a burden on all of us, we will make this easy so that when people want to buy, sell, transfer digital assets, they don't need to think through the underlying mathematics or cryptography or the various intermediary steps, even in a peer-to-peer exchange. They just use it. That's where the hard work is going to come in.
Yeah. So that my understanding of translation itself is a single point of failure. That the high integrity is needed in the works or in the translation from mathematics to the natural language, and so this is one of the main reasons why. So we started that BGIN, that because that we need to have the common dictionary among the stakeholders in one word. But the thing that the Terra and Luna case is that they claim that coin was stable, but it's not the case. And so, that in the many advertisement of the many blockchain projects, so many words might not be that good translation of the mathematics. And that we need some integrity, high integrity in that. So the work in the translating mathematics to the natural language for the general people and for the government people or something like that. But it's not easy. But I think you are working, Gary, you are working on that kind of things to the regulators or lawmakers or something like that.
Indeed. And I've been very pleasantly surprised. There's this notion that regulators and government officials need a grand education about how blockchain works. But it's actually quite the opposite in my dealings with government officials globally. I've found that they have cryptographers on their teams, that they understand several levels deep what it means to transact in peer-to-peer networks and how systems are secured and how custody works. In fact, some government officials that I have spoken with say that when they prosecute a target, occasionally they can get that target to flip and cooperate. And in exchange for a lenient sentence, that individual educates the entire department on how the blockchain works and how it can be misused and how it can be taken advantage of. So I think as we rapidly progress in our discussions with governments worldwide, I think we have to have a recognition that governments are becoming very, very smart, very, very quickly. And that's a good thing because these issues are complex and it's only with knowledge and education. There's still a little bit of work to do there, Professor, as you've pointed out. But I think very, very quickly, we will have the right people around the table to figure out these complex issues.
Thank you. And I would like to share my interesting spreadsheet I created a few weeks ago at IIW Internet Identity Workshop held in Mountain View, California, a few weeks ago. So the Internet Identity Workshop is an interesting workshop for this is a high level, but most of the key stakeholders in the digital identity world gather in one place to discuss many kind of things, including application of the blockchain for the digital identity. And at the time, Natsakimura, me, and Chris hold one interesting session titled "Wrong Words" here. You know that so we have the definition of that some technical word by engineers, by scientists, but at the same time that when that kind of technology come to the business, so there are some additional wrong intention so it will be injected to the word. For example, that this is this is a not correct definition, but might be the another aspect of the word used by that malicious business entity. For example, so that's the meaning of the sign in and login is a login to that system. So from the user point of view, but from the bad business entity point of view, that was mean to allow us to track your access across sessions and create your behavior profile. This is so we call it that this is a devil's dictionary of the dark patterns, but so that kind of thing is a source of problem might happen. So by using the new technology, so this is a interesting. So we created this spreadsheet with taking just 1 hour by the participant, but after FTX, after Terra Luna thing that I think that all of us need to explain that the true meaning of each technology term or each terms to your boss or your government or your boss or your executives. And I assume that Yuko-san might have the difficulty to explain that kind of words to your executives. But so what is your struggle? How you struggling to explain that kind of words to your executives, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the difference I feel when after I transferred myself from the public sector to the private sector. That's the literacy of the senior the officials at the institutions. It's quite ironic that when I got myself transferred over to the private sector, where I am now, the literacy of the senior officials are not quite, I don't know, reskilled, I would say, in the private sector. Like private sector people tend to stick to the old business model, and they really don't learn the new things, which means that they don't have as much literacy as I hoped for the new technologies, especially at the senior level in the private sector. And it's as the Professor Matsuo said, that the technological terms and technological ideas are difficult to be explained to the senior officials, senior officials at the management level, C-levels, in my organization, which I'm trying to change, and so yes, and also not only at the senior level, the C level, but also for the user level, we really need to have the we really need to improve the literacy or the level of knowledge for the users to avoid the things you just displayed. Professor Matsuo had just displayed in the spreadsheet. So high integrity is required on the institution by institution level, but also it is required on the individual level to a certain extent within the institution or the outside of the institution as users, in order to make this thing happen and happen safely, and to avoid 1984 novel type of dystopia type of the usage of technology.
Thank you. And Hiromi-san, so I think that you are sharing that the forum with a large number of companies.
Uh-huh.
It's not easy. I assume that it's not easy task to have some agreement of the definition of the word by all companies in your forum. But so how do you deal with that kind of that problem of in that understanding of that some specific technical words?
Yeah, first of all, yeah, there's a lot of people who wants to learn a lot of things now. Of course, there's a variety of people in the digital currency forum, but it's the same that all the companies wants to learn the high-end technologies now, because it's quite important to survive in the digital world. So they are so eager to study. So in the digital currency forum, I try to make some sort of the session to explain the recent development of the digital technology and the digital transaction. And this kind of session is very popular among the Japanese companies. And yes, I'd like to add one point, because I think that Professor Matsuo should raise a very important point. And yes, current legal framework or regulatory framework is based on the assumption that we can define the location of the transaction or location of the asset. And this is the basic framework for the many regulation and legal frameworks. And this kind of framework is challenged by the banking world. So we have to introduce the Basel regulation on the banking industry, because it's easy for the Japanese banks to lend money to US companies. So the money can easily, overcome the frontiers, geographical frontiers. This is one challenge. That's why we needed international regulation in the banking industries. And in a digitized world with blockchain technology and DLT, we cannot define the location of the asset or location of the transactions, even in the physical sense or mathematical sense. It is quite difficult, and it's quite important that Mr. Matsuo mentioned the word of ownership, the last slide. And yes, in ownership in the traditional meaning in the legal sense, ownership means that someone have the physical, possession of the physical asset. So we can define the location of the asset. But in the new world of digital world, it's quite difficult to define what is the meaning of the ownership itself. And we need a good translator to the cutting edge technology to explain to the regulators or supervisors or the lawmakers to consider or reshape the structure of the legal framework or regulatory framework. That's my sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I hope that the BGIN will be a good place to provide some high integration transparency in the translation of the words. Okay, and we have 3 minutes left. And so the last question that I would like to ask all of you so what is the future expectation to our BGIN activities? Gary first.
I have to say I've been quite impressed, Professor Matsuo, with the group that you have put together. I think it's very important that we bring together not just industry stakeholders, but academics, technologists, people who take a lot of time to think through white papers and analyses, including some very complex data analyses, and bring us all together in a way where we can actually advance this technology in, to your point, Professor Matsuo, responsible ways, together with our government counterparts. This is an ecosystem that has high promise for society. And at Electric Coin Company, being a wholly owned sub of a 501c3 nonprofit public charity whose mission is to advance economic freedom around the world, I feel as if we can have a seat at the table in a small way to contribute to what the rest of the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network constituent members contribute to. I think together we have a powerful future, and I applaud your efforts, Professor.
Thank you very much. And Yuko-san?
I truly appreciate the presence of this network, BGIN, and I have a very high expectation that the network will will enable us to bring up the integrity, as Professor Matsuo mentioned. One thing I would like to see and do by myself is to prioritize the things in terms of timeline. There are many things we hope in the future, but future can mean any time, like the 3 years from now, 5 years from now, or 30 years from now. And as a participant from the private sector, private industry sector, we need to prioritize the timeline in terms of what we can achieve in like 2 years, 3 years, and especially in light with the monetization, because we are the private sector. So I really would like to think through the timeline. What should be achieved now? What should be achieved like in 5 years' time? And what should be the goal? End goal. I would like to see in like 30 years, 50 years time, kind of thing. So like if we can, I can get some ideas about those like timelines. That would be the more appreciated from this network.
Okay, thank you very much. So let us talk on that timeline in afternoon today in that our roadmap session. Thank you very much. And last, Hiromi-san.
Yeah, thank you very much. In the coming couple of years, maybe that technological world and economic world and regulatory world would overlap, more and more overlaps. It is sure. So this BGIN will be an important role for connecting those worlds and coordinate those worlds toward the best possible legal and economic and technological infrastructure for the future society. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, three great panelists, and thank you very much for all event sponsors of BGIN block number 7. And I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for joining from Japan. This is, I think it's 3:30 a.m. I'm sorry, but and I appreciate your contribution. Thank you very much.